So if you have questions or you have comments that you would like to share with the project team, if you would be so kind as to type your comments or questions into the chat box, we will be monitoring that. And we have little mini breaks through this workshop where we're going to pause and go through some of the comments and questions on the chat in the chat box, and then we'll resume the presentation. We have you, hopefully, for the entire time, which will be until 6:30. Given the number of people that are participating, we may not be able to get through all of the questions or comments in the chat box, but rest assured that we will be capturing all the comments, and we will be reviewing all of the questions. If the questions are pertinent and related to the project, we will make sure that they are answered and shared with everybody on the project website. However, I'd like to make sure this is also an opportunity to hear about the environmental impact report and environmental assessment process. If you would like to make formal comments, however, for the draft EIR and EA, those must be submitted in writing. And we provided the person and their address and email, and I will read it out for anybody who might have visual impairment. So the person is Jason McCoy, who's a supervising transportation planner. He's with the Community Development Department with the City of West Sacramento. The address you would be mailing your written comments to would be 1110 West Capitol Avenue, 2nd floor, West Sacramento, California, 95691. Or you could email it to him at mccoyj@cityofwestsacramento.org. And we ask that you get any written comments to Jason by no later than 4 p.m. on August 23rd. Okay, I'm getting through all of that. Let's see. We would like to go through the agenda with you. So Hannah, would you mind? Thank you. So we've gone through the meeting orientation. We will have some, I will do some quick project team introductions, and then we'll have some welcoming remarks by two of the project managers, one with the City of West Sacramento, Jason McCoy, and then Jesse Goffin, who is the supervising engineer and project manager with the City of Sacramento. Then Zach Zaviglia will be doing a presentation on the project design. We'll take a little break, have a Q&A session there. And then Claire Broman with ICF will be doing a presentation on the environmental process. We'll also pause after that and do a Q&A session. And then we'll share with you what the project next steps are and wrap up. And we promise to get you out by 6:30. So with that, I'll just do some quick project team introductions. And if I call your name, if you wouldn't mind just raising your hand so that people can put a face to a name, that would be great. So as I mentioned, we have Jason McCoy, who's a supervising transportation planner and project manager for City of West Sac. We have Jesse Goffin, who's the supervising engineer and project manager for the City of Sacramento. We have Cecilyn Foote, who's an associate civil engineer and project manager for the City of Sacramento. Zach Zaviglia, president and project manager for Mark Thomas. Kira Davis, project engineer with Mark Thomas. Claire Broman, environmental project manager with ICF Kaiser. And then Elise Brockett and Hannah Chuden, who are both with AIM Consulting. Okay, so that's the team. And I'd like to ask Jason McCoy if he'd like to give some welcoming remarks.
Okay, just want to thank everyone for attending our virtual open house for the Broadway Bridge project. First off, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the city council members of our respective cities, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, and Congresswoman Matsui and her staff for their support and leadership in helping to secure the funding for this and other immensely important infrastructure projects that help our region to become successful. I'd also like to thank Omar Elgast, Lan Fan, Allison Rogers, Bob Baca, and everyone at the Federal Highway Administration who have helped to fund this project and worked with the city to administer the grants that we've received. I'd also like to thank Carl Hausner and his team from the U.S. Coast Guard for working with us to identify waterway user design constraints. I'd also wanted to thank Laura Leffler, Thelina Batal, Jess Avila, and Tu Vang, and the folks at the California Department of Transportation who've been immensely helpful in helping to move this project forward. And finally, I'd like to offer my thanks to our project design and environmental team, some of whom you'll see and hear from today, but many of whom work diligently behind the scenes in order to make transformative projects like this possible. Um, Broadway Bridge itself is a strategic investment for the future of our two cities and our region. For West Sacramento, this neighborhood-friendly bridge will not only provide better connectivity for motorists and transit users, it'll also help transform the Sacramento riverfront from the old 20th century industrial landscape that turned its back on the river and fenced off public access. In place of that, we'll have a vision of a clean, sustainable, livable, and economically thriving mixed-use neighborhood that promotes healthy activity and celebrates the Sacramento River. This project will connect both West Sacramento's Bridge District and Pioneer Bluff and Stone Lock neighborhoods with City of Sacramento's Broadway specific plan area, the Broadway corridor, and the Central City, supporting economic development within our core while ensuring resiliency in both transportation systems through increased transit connectivity and bolstering public safety by providing a much needed connection for coordinated emergency response and evacuation due to increasingly common fires, floods, and other disasters. I'll close by saying that the future of the Sacramento region is not about what side of the river you live on. It's not about what neighborhood you live in or other boundaries, either physical or imaginary, that separate us. Our future relies on coming together to help solve problems in pursuit of regionally accepted goals for the common good. As the cities work together to make this project happen, we look forward to receiving your input today and in the future phases as we ask for the community's help to inspire the design and ultimately build Broadway Bridge. I'd like to turn this over to Jesse Gotham with the City of Sacramento for his opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Yeah, thank you again to everyone who has taken their evening, Lord, to join us for this project. And as Jason said so well, these projects are very important to both cities, and our policymakers have worked for many years on activating the waterfront. And so, Broadway, through the efforts of West Sacramento City, received the Tiger Grant, I believe back in 2016-17, that really made the planning and the environmental review and the alternatives development possible. So we're really happy to reach this milestone in partnership and along with some of the other bridges that we've been working on as agencies. This is a fantastic milestone just to bring this project to you for your review and comment. We heard early on in the planning process to make a neighborhood friendly bridge, a 2-lane bridge, multimodal, that would accommodate walking and biking. And we are working on many complete streets projects. You're probably very familiar with Broadway Complete Streets project as well, that Megan Johnson has been working on. She's also here this evening. But other projects we have along the waterfront meant to activate the waterfront, such as our other bike trails in other parts of the city. So this all just goes to stitching the cities together, making a more connected bikeway for active transportation. And so we just appreciate, we don't want to miss any opportunities. We want your comments tonight, and then also on the environmental impact report. And also, we just recognize the challenges ahead, that this is an expensive project, but it's not keeping us from planning it, from doing the environmental clearance, and being ready for the next opportunities that may show up. So with that, I'll hand it back to Jason and the project delivery team.
Actually, I think we are moving on to Zach Saviglia, who will be giving a project background.
Thanks, Gladys. So like Jason and Jesse mentioned, this project has been in the planning efforts for quite some time. I wanted to quickly go through some of the project background before we discuss the project elements that are described in the environmental document. So Hannah, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. Planning for this bridge started over a decade ago. The Sacramento River Crossings Alternative Study was completed in 2011. And as shown on the screen, it evaluated multiple crossings between Sacramento and West Sacramento um, throughout the Sacramento River. Next slide, please, Hannah. There were a number of goals that were established through that study, including increased economic development in the area, improving urban plan developments, making walking and bicycling across the river easier. For anyone that's tried to bike or walk across the river, you know right now there's only one bridge that connects both cities that's really convenient, and that's the Tower Bridge. Reduce vehicle delays across the river, increase riverfront access along with what Jason was mentioning earlier. It's replanning the riverfront through this area, and then improving travel safety and emergency access. Through this, there was a neighborhood-friendly bridge that was defined as the primary goal for the project, which is a bridge that's identified to serve short trips, local trips. We're not intending to be a regional facility with this project. We want to serve all users. That includes vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, and transit. Have a bridge that's architecturally pleasing since it's going to be such a forefront to the community. A project that doesn't require widening any of the roadways on either side. So this project fits within the area. We don't have to go through a lot of corridor improvements on either end. Be a facility that is low speed and low profile, again, going along with that goal of being serving all users. And then a project that does not connect to primarily residential streets. So finding that good balance of collector roads. Through this effort, there were two locations that were identified for further development. They were the North Market area, that is the I Street Bridge. So that environmental document was completed in 2019 and is currently in the final design stage. And then the South Market Bridge, which is the Broadway Bridge that we'll be talking about this evening. Next slide, please. As Jason mentioned, we are connecting to a number of planned areas in this location, some of which are shown here on this graphic. We talked about the Pioneer Bluff and Stone Lock Reuse Master Plan, the West Broadway specific plan on the Sacramento side, which includes Miller Park. In addition, there's other previously planned projects in the area. On the Sacramento side, it's the Broadway Complete Streets project, and the docks project that is located on the north side of US 50. And then on the West Sacramento side, there's the Bridge District specific plan, again, on the north side of US 50. And you can see that the bridge connection is intended to connect these two areas, but we're coming into an area that has a lot of planning efforts already ongoing. Next slide, please, Hannah. Early on in the project development process, we evaluated a number of alternatives. And this was done so we could find the best fit that connects both sides of the river, incorporating all of the planning efforts that are going on through this section. So you can see on the West Sacramento side, the left side of the image here, there are a number of locations where this new alignment could have touched down in the Pioneer Bluff area. Similarly, on the Sacramento side, the alignments could have touched down in a number of areas, but there's one constraint, which is I-5. So all of the alignments come to the same point on the west side of I-5 because there was a recognized constraint with that crossing that we could not have reconstructed or removed any of the I-5 overcrossings over Broadway. So all of the alignments touched down before the I-5 overcrossing. Next slide, please. So with that as the backdrop of all of the previous planning efforts, what we did then is we've been working the last several years on identifying the project alternatives that would be studied in the environmental document. So some of what we heard through previous efforts are shown here on the screen. Again, this is recognition of bicycles and pedestrians being a much needed facility to be accommodated on this bridge, something that is available for walking to connect both communities, There is a desire to build this bridge soon, recognizing that it is a very costly piece of infrastructure. There is a recognized need for this, and other comments. I won't read them all, but other comments like that. Next slide shows a survey that we did that looked at what are the envisioned uses of this bridge? Meaning, was this going to be a bridge that is primarily served by vehicles or serving vehicles, or a bridge that's primarily serving bicycles and pedestrians? And what you see here is a really even distribution of anticipated uses between transit uses, vehicle uses, walking and bicycling. And if you look at from a percentage standpoint, the vehicle use is actually the single lowest from one specific use. So bicycle and pedestrians, if you combine that as an alternative mode of transportation, that is higher than vehicle use. So it's good to have this as an understanding, because it did go into informing the types of alignments that we were going to be evaluating with the project. Next slide, Hannah. So with all of that data and looking at those previous alignments that were identified in the environmental document, it was identified with these two alignments that were moved forward for further investigation. So alternative B is the northernmost alignment that's represented there with the blue line. It connects at 15th Street and Jefferson Boulevard in West Sacramento. And then it goes across the river, again, connecting on Broadway prior to the I-5 overcrossing. Then second alternative was alternative C, which connects to South River Road, again, goes across the river and connects to Broadway on the west side of I-5. Both of these alignments were picked because they serve the intended uses of the project, and then they also fit with the adjacent developments and planning efforts that were ongoing. In terms of the uses of the bridge, this is showing the cross-section that's proposed in the environmental document. So it is envisioned as a 2-lane bridge, but with that, it's a very wide structure to accommodate all modes of transportation. So you see the 12-foot sidewalks on both sides of the bridge, 6-foot buffered bike lanes to have that class 2 facility for bicycles, and then 2 travel lanes, 1 lane in each direction with a center 2-way left turn lane, a center median, which is really envisioned to help traffic operations at the adjacent intersections off of the bridge. As we move off of the bridge, the roadway layout is very similar. Again, we have the 12-foot sidewalks, we have the 6-foot buffered bike lanes, and then the 2 travel lanes in each direction with the center median. As we're looking at developing renderings for this project and how this is going to fit within the context of the area. So in this view, we're looking north from the existing just Miller Park area, just south of the project, looking north towards Highway 50. This is the existing photo. And then the next slide shows where that bridge would be coming in. Now, I don't want everyone to focus on the actual geometry and the image of the bridge, because we're not there in terms of developing aesthetic details yet. The intent with this rendering is to show where the bridge comes in, and then from a massing standpoint, what is the anticipated visual impact of that? As far as the actual final designs and showing the aesthetic details, that is a follow-on process that'll take place after we get through the environmental document. This next slide, we're now on top of the Highway 50 overcrossing. We're looking south towards Broadway and south along the river. This is the existing photo. And then this shows where that bridge would be coming in. Again, disregard the details showing the bridge form itself. What's important to understand is the massing and what this bridge will look like. From a technical standpoint, the bridge is going to be a 6-span structure, but the center portion of that is going to be a movable span. And the question we always get from everyone is, why does this bridge need to be a movable structure? Why can't it just be a fixed structure like Highway 50 or some of the other bridges along the river? Next slide, Hannah. The main reason is because for this stretch of the river, the Coast Guard does have jurisdiction over approving bridge permits and new bridges over the river. So like Jason mentioned at the beginning, we have coordinated with the US Coast Guard, and they've given us their conditions for the project, which specifies how wide the opening needs to be, how tall the opening needs to be, and more importantly, that we need to maintain access for navigation along the river for mariners. So with that, we went through a process with the Coast Guard to look at the design vehicle for this opening. You know, it's similar to how you would look at a design vehicle for a road, except that your design vehicle is actually a tugboat pushing a barge. And so this is the design vehicle that we were given by the US Coast Guard. And the reason why this is important is, as everyone I think knows on this call, this is a region that's protected by levees up and down the Sacramento River. The Sacramento River is a major flood control backbone for this area. And if there ever is a need for repairs along the Sacramento River, the most efficient way to handle those repairs is with this barge, because it can move a lot of material to a location. This next slide shows just an example of what that looks like. If there's ever a section of the levee that is failing or in need of repairs, it's very efficient to get that material there using the Sacramento River and with that barge that I just showed earlier. So with that, that was what we were evaluating with the project. And then we worked through a process with the Coast Guard to identify how big that opening needed to be. So this is using anticipated sailing lines for that bridge and talking to mariners that operate along this section of the river. So for this project, if you go to the next slide, Hannah, there are 3 potential movable bridges, 3 different types that are accessible to us for this project, given the opening that we were given. So the 3 primary types are a swing bridge, which is the existing I Street Bridge is a swing bridge. A bascule bridge, which we don't have a lot in this area, but you see a lot in the Chicago area, and there is some further south along the Sacramento River. And then the lift bridge, which is similar to the existing tower bridge. Next slide, Hannah. What's important is that each one of these bridge types has its own operating range that makes it the most efficient based on the opening conditions. And at this location where we have roughly 170-foot opening, all 3 of those bridge types are efficient structures for us. So in the environmental document, what's identified is that that center portion is going to be a movable bridge, but the actual form and type of that bridge will be decided on at a later date as we get further into the final design stage and start working through some more of the detailed design aspects. But what is identified is that it would be a movable bridge going forward. From an overview on pedestrians and bicyclists, what's important is that there is adjacent projects that we are connecting to. So this is showing an example and a screenshot of the Broadway specific plan, the complete streets plan. So this is looking at that cross section, which includes, again, 2 lanes or 1 lane in each direction, a center median, and then buffered bike lanes along the corridor. And then the next slide shows how those pedestrian and bicycle facilities would be treated where the bridge crosses the levees at the Sacramento River. So along both sides of the river, there are planned bicycle trails. And so what's envisioned is that the bike trail, as we're coming up to the bridge, would have 2 options. One option would be to go underneath the bridge and continue along the Sacramento River, either north or south. The second option would be to connect to Broadway and then cross over the river, again, either into West Sacramento or into Sacramento. This cross section would be mimicked on both sides of the river. In terms of schedule going forward, where we are right now is right in the middle there with that green color. So we've developed our environmental document. We're working through final approvals of the environmental document. The blue represents our final project report, which is really just documenting all of the project elements. So the goal is to wrap up the environmental document and the project report by this fall. The next stages of moving forward with design and construction are going to be dependent on funding. So this is something that we've envisioned as a 2030, 2035 construction timeframe, because it is such a costly piece of infrastructure, and securing that amount of money is going to take some time.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Okay, now I'd like to invite Claire Broman to unmute her mic and share a little bit of information about the environmental process.
Thank you. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. So here's a general flow chart of the environmental process. And as you saw in the earlier project schedule slide that Zach was talking about, the environmental analysis will conclude this year, but we first announced the preparation of the environmental impact report and environmental assessment, which is abbreviated to EIR-EA, back in 2017, and sought input from regulatory agencies and the public on the scope of the project and the impact analysis. The draft EIR-EA is now available for review, which is an opportunity again for input on its contents from both regulatory agencies and the public. After the close of the comment period, we will respond to the comments on the draft EIR-EA and prepare a final document for both local and federal approval. Approval of the environmental document is a separate step from consideration of approval of the project itself. So go to the next slide, please. So the purpose of an EIR-EA is, and this is a joint EIR-EA, is to inform the local, state, and federal decision makers and the public of the environmental effects of the project prior to making any decision about the project. So the draft EIR-EA was prepared to comply with both the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. The EIR-EA identifies the project's potential for impacts and identifies feasible mitigation to avoid or reduce significant impacts. The EIR-EA also assesses and identifies the potential for cumulative, that's long-term and additive effects, and growth-inducing impacts. Next slide, please. So here's a long list. In this document, many resource topics are addressed. So they're all listed here. The effects of the project are compared to established thresholds, ordinances, laws, regulations, and other policies that apply or control or limit the design of the project. So the long host of things that are considered. Go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to just very greatly summarize the results of the environmental impact analysis. There's a lot of detail about the existing conditions, the assumed future conditions, and then how this project fits into all of those scenarios in the environmental document itself. So please read either the whole thing, if you're brave, or the sections that are very important to you to get more details. For the resource or issue areas listed on this slide, the analysis results indicate that the project would either not cause an impact or would not cause a significant or an adverse impact. Most of these areas are common to both project alternatives, the B and C alignments that have been discussed. And the outcomes are within acceptable thresholds or standards and don't require the adoption of mitigation measures to reduce the level of impact to be compliant with existing regulations and policies. So for these issue areas, the project is already compliant or within those thresholds. There you go. So these, well, I suppose you can say, as you imagine for a project that's putting a new bridge across a river, like the Sacramento River, the EIR-EA does describe several impacts that are considered significant, including impacts related to the in-water construction activities that are needed to build the bridge. We saw some questions in the chat earlier about that. The EIR-EA also identifies measures that, when implemented, would mitigate the severity of each of the significant impacts listed here down to a less than significant level. Again, most of these significant impacts for resource topics listed here are common to both project alternatives. There is a significant impact unique to alternative C, that's the one that tees in West Sacramento, related to intersection and roadway congestion levels that would be inconsistent with city thresholds. And Jason McCoy did just discuss that issue just a few moments ago. Like for other significant impacts, there is a mitigation measure proposed to reduce the impact, but it still doesn't operate as well as the B alignment. Just to note that the environmental process also includes consultation with resource agencies, such as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Marine Fisheries Service, the State Historic Preservation Officer, to obtain their concurrence on the impact findings relative to each agency's jurisdiction and the suitability of the proposed mitigation measures. So next slide. So, oops, well, previous slide, sorry, I'm not tracking with you as well. So there is what we call one significant and unavoidable impact. The analysis predicted that noise levels during construction, so the noise from construction equipment, would be louder than the allowable standards established by both West Sacramento and Sacramento noise ordinances. And there isn't a feasible mitigation that we can implement to reduce that temporary noise level of the equipment to lower than the noise ordinance threshold. So this is considered a significant and unavoidable impact. And there's more information about how we got to that conclusion and other conclusions in the draft EIR. So now please go on to the next slide.
I want to thank everybody who had joined us today. We had an outstanding number of participants, and we really, really appreciate all of the good questions and comments that we received. I do want to remind everybody that if you would like to make formal comments on the draft EIR or environmental assessment, it must be submitted in writing to Jason McCoy, Supervising Transportation Planner with the City of West Sacramento in the Community Development Department at 1110 West Capitol Avenue on the 2nd floor, West Sacramento, California 95691, or you can email it to him at mccoyj@cityofwestsacramento.org. And the deadline for any public comment will be until 4 p.m. on August 23rd. Again, I want to thank everybody who participated. And as always, we want to get you out on time, and we are at 6:30. And we hope that every one of you has a rest of your evening is great and you enjoy your dinner. So thank you for your participation and have a good night.